Have you ever felt that knot in your stomach when you check your phone and see that someone has left you on red for hours? Have you ever lain awake at night replaying that cutting remark a colleague made, feeling the sting as if it happened seconds ago instead of days? Have you ever wished you could just stop caring so much about what others think, what they say, and how they treat you? Imagine standing in a crowded room and overhearing your name. The conversation hushes as you approach. That familiar sensation washes over you. Shame, vulnerability, the certainty that you're being judged and found wanting. In that moment, you feel utterly defenseless, as though anyone could cut you to the core with just a glance or word. The truth is brutal. As long as you try to avoid pain, it will continue to control you. As long as you try to shield yourself, to build armor, to hide behind masks, you will remain a hostage to everything and everyone around you. But what if there's another way? What if Carl Jung, one of history's most profound psychological thinkers, had already mapped the path to emotional invulnerability, and we've simply failed to follow his directions? Today, we're diving into Jung's revolutionary understanding of the human psyche to uncover how you can reach a state where nothing and no one can truly hurt you. Not because you've become cold or detached, but because you've become whole in a way few people ever achieve. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. These words from Jung reveal the first crucial insight. What hurts you isn't actually coming from outside, it's being activated from within. Think about it. Why does the same comment bounce harmlessly off one person, yet completely devastate another? Why can some people endure heartbreaking losses with remarkable resilience, while others collapse under seemingly minor rejections? The answer lies in what Jung called our complexes, those emotional landmines buried in our psyches that explode when triggered by external events. The pain you feel isn't created by the event itself, but by what that event touches inside you. Old wounds, unresolved traumas, denied aspects of yourself that lie festering in the shadows. You still suffer so much because on some level you believe you can control how the world treats you. You're still trying to be good enough, smart enough, strong enough, as if that guarantees protection from pain. But control is an illusion, and as long as you cling to it, you live in constant tension. Most people believe their emotional sensitivity is simply who they are, an unchangeable trait that leaves them perpetually vulnerable to others' opinions. Every criticism feels like a knife, every rejection like abandonment. They construct elaborate defenses, perfectionism, people-pleasing, avoidance, anything to keep that pain at bay. But Jung would say you're treating the symptom while ignoring the disease. You're trying to control the external world instead of understanding your internal one. How can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also, if I am to be whole. With these words, Jung introduced one of his most crucial concepts, the shadow self. Your shadow isn't evil or malevolent. It's simply all the parts of yourself that you've deemed unacceptable and pushed into the unconscious. It's everything you don't want to be but fear that you are. It's your unacknowledged selfishness, aggression, desire, weakness, and need. The shadow gains power not from its existence but from your denial of it. And here's the critical insight Jung offers. The more you deny your shadow, the more vulnerable you become to emotional pain. When someone criticizes qualities you've banished to your shadow, calling you selfish when you pride yourself on generosity, or weak when you've invested everything in appearing strong, it creates an emotional crisis. Their words seem to reveal the very thing you've been desperate to hide. But Jung discovered something remarkable. Integrating your shadow, bringing it into conscious awareness and accepting it as part of yourself, doesn't make you worse, it makes you whole. And wholeness is the foundation of true emotional invulnerability. Consider someone who has spent years priding themselves on being selfless and accommodating. In therapy, they might recognize the resentment building beneath this persona, the unexpressed anger, the unacknowledged desire to put themselves first sometimes. Acknowledging these shadow elements doesn't turn them into a monster, it liberates them. When someone later accuses them of being selfish, the accusation lacks its former power. They can respond with curiosity rather than defensiveness, because they've already made peace with the fact that yes, like every human being, there is selfishness within them. This is what Jung meant when he said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Wholeness creates a psychological foundation that external forces cannot easily disturb. The persona is a complicated system of relations between individual consciousness and society, fittingly enough a kind of mask, designed on the one hand to make a definite impression upon others and on the other to conceal the true nature of the individual. In Jung's framework, the persona is the social mask we wear, the face we present to the world. It's composed of the roles we play, the expectations we meet, and the image we cultivate. There's nothing inherently wrong with the persona. We all need one to function in society. The problem arises when we become identified with our persona, when we mistake the mask for who we truly are. When your sense of self is built around your persona, being the successful professional, the perfect parent, the strong one who never shows weakness, any threat to that image becomes existentially threatening. If your identity is wrapped up in being respected, then disrespect feels like annihilation. If your self-worth depends on achievement, then failure feels like death. Jung proposed a radically different approach. Instead of perfecting the mask, recognize it as just that, a mask. Understand that your true self exists beyond social roles and expectations. This doesn't mean abandoning the persona entirely, but rather developing a healthy relationship with it, wearing it when useful, but not mistaking it for your essence. Most people believe vulnerability is weakness. They construct an impeccable persona, competent, self-sufficient, always in control. The effort to maintain this image is exhausting, and the fear of it cracking is constant. The turning point comes when you realize that true strength isn't found in impenetrable armor, but in the courage to be seen as you are, imperfect, sometimes afraid. When you allow yourself to be genuinely vulnerable, something miraculous happens. You become less hurtable, not more. If you've found value in these insights so far about Jung's approach to emotional resilience, consider subscribing to this channel. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This statement from Jung contains a profound truth about our emotional vulnerabilities. Jung observed that we often project unconscious aspects of ourselves onto others, particularly qualities we don't want to acknowledge in ourselves. These projections then become the source of our strongest emotional reactions. Think about someone who drives you absolutely crazy, someone whose very presence triggers an irrational level of irritation in you. Jung would suggest that what bothers you most about this person is likely something you've disowned in yourself. The arrogance you can't stand in your colleague, it might reflect your own unacknowledged desire for recognition. The neediness that repels you in a friend, perhaps it mirrors your own denied vulnerability. The selfishness you condemn in a family member, it could be highlighting your own unexpressed self-interest. These projections create a perfect storm for emotional pain because they operate outside our awareness. We genuinely believe our distress is caused by the other person's behavior, never suspecting that we're actually reacting to disowned parts of ourselves. Consider someone who has a colleague whose confidence triggers intense feelings of inadequacy. They might be convinced the colleague is deliberately trying to make them feel small. But through Jungian work, they could come to recognize that they're projecting onto this person their own disowned ambition, qualities they'd been taught were inappropriate to express. What you resist persists. What you accept transforms. Once you reclaim your projections, acknowledging your own ambition and right to take up space, your colleague's behavior no longer has the power to wound you. Your relationship improves because you're no longer using them as a screen for your own internal conflicts. This is what Jung meant when he said, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. When you reclaim your projections, you reclaim your power. The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. With these words, Jung described what he considered the ultimate goal of psychological development: individuation. Individuation is the process of psychological integration, where all aspects of the personality, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, come together to form a cohesive whole. It's not about becoming perfect, it's about becoming complete. Most people spend their lives fragmented, with different parts of themselves at war. The conscious mind rejects the unconscious. The persona fights the shadow. The rational intellect dismisses the intuitive wisdom of the deeper self. This internal division is what makes us so vulnerable to external pain. When we're already at war with ourselves, it doesn't take much for others to wound us. Jung discovered that as individuation progresses, something remarkable happens. Emotional resilience naturally emerges, not as a forced state or an act of will, but as the natural consequence of becoming whole. When you've integrated your shadow, criticism can't expose what you've already embraced. When you've developed a healthy relationship with your persona, rejection can't threaten your sense of self. When you've reclaimed your projections, others' actions can't trigger unconscious complexes. The individuated person still experiences the full range of human emotions, including pain, but they're no longer dominated by these experiences. They can feel hurt without being hurt, experience loss without being lost, face rejection without feeling rejected. Know this: the path of individuation can be lonely at times. Few people choose to look this deeply within themselves. As you transform, you may find distance growing between you and those still living through their masks and defenses. This isn't rejection, it's maturation. It's the natural consequence of no longer fitting where you once hid. The self is not only the center, but also the whole circumference which embraces both conscious and unconscious. It is the center of this totality, just as the ego is the center of consciousness. With these words, Jung introduced perhaps his most profound concept, the self. In Jungian psychology, the self, with a capital S, is the archetype of wholeness and the regulating center of the psyche. Unlike the ego, which is just the center of consciousness, the self encompasses the totality of the psyche, both conscious and unconscious. The self represents your most authentic, complete nature, not who you think you are or who others expect you to be, but who you most deeply and truly are. It's the organizing principle that guides the individuation process, orchestrating your psychological development toward wholeness. Most people never experience a direct connection with their self. They live entirely from the ego, that limited sense of I that's constructed through personal history and social conditioning. When the ego is mistaken for the whole of who you are, life becomes an endless struggle to protect this limited identity. But Jung discovered something revolutionary. As you progress in individuation and develop a relationship with the self, you gain access to a center that cannot be damaged by external circumstances. The self, unlike the ego, is not vulnerable to the opinions or rejections of others. It exists beyond the realm of social approval or worldly success. You might experience moments of connection with this deeper self, usually in nature, during meditation, or in states of creative flow. In these moments, there's a profound sense that who you are extends far beyond your personal history, achievements, failures, or social standing. There's a recognition of an identity that exists independent of all external validation. From this place, being hurt by others takes on an entirely different meaning. The ego can still feel pain. That's part of being human. But that pain no longer threatens your fundamental sense of who you are. The alchemical motto was solve et coagula, separate and recombine. Jung was fascinated by alchemy, seeing, in its symbolic processes, a perfect metaphor for psychological transformation. In alchemy, base metals are transformed into gold through a series of operations. Jung recognized that the psyche undergoes similar processes on the path to wholeness. This alchemical perspective offers a powerful framework for understanding how emotional pain can be transformed. The process begins with calcination, allowing the fire of suffering to burn away what's superficial. Then comes dissolution, letting rigid structures of the ego soften. Next is separation, distinguishing what's truly you from what you've absorbed from others. The crucial stage is conjunction, bringing together what has been separated, integrating shadow and light, conscious and unconscious, vulnerability and strength. This integration doesn't eliminate pain, but transforms it into wisdom, compassion, and authentic power. Many people have witnessed this alchemical process in their own lives, particularly around feelings of shame. For years, shame might be an unbearable emotion that they would do anything to avoid. But as they learn to work with shame alchemically, to feel it fully, understand its origins, separate what is theirs from what they've internalized from others, and eventually integrate it as valuable information rather than a definitive judgment, its power over them diminishes dramatically. This is what Jung meant when he described the goal of psychological development not as the elimination of suffering, but as the transformation of it. The person who becomes truly unhurtable isn't someone who no longer feels pain, but someone who has learned to transform pain into growth, wisdom, and deeper humanity. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. This statement from Jung captures the essence of what it means to live from wholeness rather than woundedness. Most people live reactively, their emotional states determined by external circumstances. Something good happens, they feel good. Something bad happens, they feel bad. Their sense of self expands and contracts based on how others treat them, whether they're succeeding or failing, whether they're accepted or rejected. But Jung discovered a different possibility, a way of living from an integrated center that remains stable regardless of external conditions. This doesn't mean becoming emotionally flat or detached. It means developing an inner anchor so secure that you can fully engage with life's ups and downs without losing yourself in them. The person who has done the work of integration still experiences the full spectrum of human emotions. They still feel joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, love and loss. The difference is that these experiences no longer define them. They move through life's circumstances rather than being moved by them. What's most striking about people who have done this deep psychological work isn't an absence of feeling, but a quality of being fully alive and present, engaged with life in all its messiness and beauty, without the constant need to protect or defend themselves. The foundation of all mental illness is the unwillingness to experience legitimate suffering. This insight from Jung brings us full circle to where we began. The path to becoming unhurtable isn't about becoming invulnerable in the conventional sense. It's not about feeling less, caring less, or building impenetrable walls around your heart. It's about becoming whole, integrating all aspects of yourself into a unified consciousness that can remain centered even in the midst of pain. True emotional freedom comes not from avoiding suffering, but from transforming your relationship to it. It comes from recognizing that pain, like joy, is part of the full spectrum of human experience, and that your capacity to feel deeply is not a weakness, but a strength when it exists within the context of an integrated self. The person who has done this integration work still bleeds when cut. They still feel grief when they lose someone they love. They still experience disappointment when their hopes aren't realized. But these experiences no longer threaten their fundamental sense of who they are. The pain doesn't define them, control them, or break them. This is the gift Jung offers us, not a way to escape the human condition, but a way to embrace it fully, with all its light and shadow, pleasure and pain, expansion and contraction. Not a way to avoid being hurt, but a way to live so authentically that being hurt no longer means being harmed. As you continue on your own journey of integration, remember that each step toward wholeness is also a step toward true emotional freedom. Each shadow you face, each projection you reclaim, each complex you understand and integrate brings you closer to that unshakable center that no one and nothing can truly damage. Nothing, absolutely nothing, will shield you from suffering if you remain unconscious of what happens within you. Awakening is not a magical event. It's a daily choice. It's looking within even when it hurts. The world will still be the world, sometimes kind, sometimes cruel, always unpredictable. People will still be people, sometimes loving, sometimes hurtful, always complex. But you will have discovered what Jung knew, that the ultimate protection comes not from controlling what happens to you, but from transforming who you are. And in that transformation lies a freedom beyond anything you've imagined. The freedom to be fully alive, fully human, fully yourself in a world that can no longer truly hurt you because you are finally, completely whole.